I thought the weight of my job would always be the patients. But I learned the truth the year I fell in love with Dr. Ryan Callahan. Because when you give your heart to someone brilliant but broken, you don't just fight for your patients anymore. You fight for them, too. Ryan and I met during a night shift in the emergency department. It was one of those shifts where everything collided at once. A cardiac arrest rolling in just as a trauma came through the ambulance bay. The kind of chaos that turns a hospital into a battlefield. He was new to the hospital then, still earning the respect of the staff. And I remember the first thing that struck me about him wasn't his looks, though he had the kind of presence you couldn't ignore, but the way he moved in the middle of that storm. Calm, confident, precise. I'd seen seasoned doctors crack under less, but Ryan carried the weight like it was nothing. After the adrenaline drained and the unit quieted, I caught him leaning against the counter at the nurse's station, running a hand through his hair. He looked over at me and said, "You don't miss a beat, do you?" I smiled, too tired to come up with anything witty. It's my job not to. From there, it was small things, late-night conversations when the halls grew quiet, coffee runs during brutal stretches, the steady way his eyes found mine across crowded rooms. We moved from colleagues to friends, to something more in a way that felt both impossible and inevitable. He made me laugh in a job where laughter was rare, and he reminded me that even in the bleakest moments, connection mattered. It wasn't long before we were inseparable. Dinner after shifts turned into nights spent together, mornings tangled up before the next day began. Being with Ryan was like stepping into a fire, hot, consuming, and dangerous if you weren't careful. But I didn't care. I loved him. The first time I noticed the drinking, I brushed it off. We'd just come off a 14-hour shift, the kind that left your bones aching. He pulled a bottle of whiskey from his cabinet and poured 2 glasses, offering one to me. I sipped out of politeness, though alcohol never sat well with me, and when he finished his, he poured another without hesitation. "You need to take the edge off sometimes," he said, almost defensively. "Otherwise, it eats you alive." I let it go, because in that moment, I understood. We'd seen 2 patients die that night, and their families' cries still echoed in my head. If he needed a drink to drown that out, who was I to judge? But as weeks passed, I noticed patterns. A glass turned into 3. Nights when we should have been resting were spent with him nursing a bottle until it ran dry. And sometimes, he'd show up to morning rounds with bloodshot eyes, his breath just faintly tinged with alcohol, though no one else seemed to notice. At first, it didn't touch his work. He was still brilliant, still fast, still the doctor who seemed untouchable. But slowly, the edges began to fray. He forgot to order a critical lab once, and I had to chase it down. Another time, he snapped at a patient's family so harshly that I had to step in and smooth it over. I told myself it was stress, fatigue, the impossible weight of this job, but deep down, I knew better. The night everything cracked was a trauma code. An older man, hit by a car, chest crushed. I was at the bedside, Ryan across from me, calling the shots. But as the patient's rhythm collapsed, Ryan hesitated. Just for a beat, but in trauma, a beat can mean everything. "Epi now!" I shouted, thrusting the syringe into his hand. He blinked like he was waking from a fog, then administered it. We got the patient back, but my hands shook the rest of the night. Because hesitation wasn't Ryan. Hesitation wasn't brilliance. Hesitation was something else. After that shift, I found him in the locker room. "You were off tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He bristled immediately. "Everyone's off sometimes." "Not like that." "You froze, Ryan." "What's going on?" His eyes narrowed. "Don't start." I wanted to push, but the wall between us was already up, and I knew if I pushed too hard, he'd shut me out completely. So I swallowed my fear, kissed him goodnight, and prayed I was wrong. But I wasn't. At home, the signs grew louder. Bottles hidden in cupboards, glasses left half full in the sink, the smell that lingered on his clothes even after a shower. When I confronted him, he always had an answer. It's just to relax. I'm under pressure. Everyone in this job has their coping mechanisms. And maybe that was true. But not everyone risked their patience in the process. One night I came home after a shift to find him sitting in the dark, a glass in his hand, the bottle nearly empty beside him. His eyes were glazed, but his words were sharp. "You think you're better than me?" he snapped when I tried to take the glass away. "You think you don't need something to get through this job?" "I need you," I said quietly. "Not this." For a moment, I thought he'd break, thought he'd shatter under the weight of what he was doing to himself. But instead, he turned away, and I sat there in the silence, realizing that love alone couldn't fix this. The breaking point came weeks later. It was a routine case, appendicitis. Straightforward, simple. But halfway through, he made a mistake. A slip of the scalpel, a cut too deep. The OR froze, and I felt the blood drain from my face. We corrected it, saved the patient, but the whispers started immediately. Later that night, I found him in the on-call room, his hands shaking as he poured whiskey into a coffee cup. "This has to stop," I said, my voice trembling with the force of it. "Ryan, you're going to kill someone." He looked at me, eyes bloodshot, face pale. "I can't stop." I don't know how the words gutted me, because for the first time, he wasn't denying it. He wasn't making excuses. He was telling me the truth. I sat beside him, took his hand, and said, "Then let me help you. Let's find someone, a program, something. Please." He pulled away, pacing the room. "If anyone finds out, I'm done. My career, everything I've built, it's over." "Your career is already at risk," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "Every patient you touch is at risk. Don't you see? This isn't just about you anymore. It's about them. It's about us." For a long moment, he just stared at me, silent, his chest rising and falling like he was running out of breath. Then finally, he whispered, "I'm scared." I wrapped my arms around him, holding him as tightly as I could. "So am I. But we'll do it together." The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. He entered a treatment program quietly, without the hospital's knowledge. I covered for him where I could, kept his secret close to my chest, all while praying he'd follow through. There were days when he wanted to quit, when the cravings clawed at him so hard he could barely function. But he kept going.